And before I get into my speech, I would have never expected, knowing his history, that he would have been the swing vote behind this particular piece, this important case. And as we move forward, and as this bill leaves the Senate and moves in the House, there's another one key person, and that's going to be John Boehner. Because what John Boehner does in the House will determine whether or not we have immigration reform. So if you believe in prayer, if you believe in getting out and lobbying, if you believe in trying to find somebody to touch someone's soul, let's reach out now and start trying to touch John Boehner, okay? Because he's going to be the key. Many of you have heard me say this many times, and I'm going to say it again, and that's, if there's anything I could be in life, if I could go back and do it all over again, if I could do anything I wanted to do, I'd be an immigration lawyer. And today, more than ever, that's what I want to be. I brought some people with me here today, and you've already met some of them, so this is going to shorten the presentation a little bit because I did not expect this at all. But first of all, my lovely wife, Kay, whenever you're on XCOM, if you're the spouse, you learn that your husband soon has a separate family. So many vacations delayed. It seems like every year the anniversary celebrations were postponed because we had National Day of Action always falls at that time. So she's the strength behind me, and she's the one that just helps put up with me throughout this process. Kay, would you please stand? Well, you've already met Kelly. Kelly is, a great lawyer. She practices with me. She runs the family, and she runs the removal litigation section. Kelly is married to Adam Hall, and Adam is a litigator with Oklahoma City's law firm. But Kelly, could you and Adam please stand? You've seen Matt. He's the one with the humor. But for all the patience that God did not give me, he gave Kelly less. And he took all those and he put them in a package and he gave them to Matt. And it's a damn good thing. Because Matt has to work with the Department of Labor every day running our PERM program. Matt is married to Megan Richard. Megan is heavy into the wine business, and thank goodness, because we had a wonderful previous tour of wine country before we came. So Matt and Megan, would you please stand? It's 1982, and the AILa Texas Chapter Conference was in Mexico. That's the year that I graduated from law school. I was a legal intern. I hadn't passed the bar exam yet, but I'd written a law school paper on governmental estoppel in the immigration context. And for some reason, I was invited to speak at that Texas chapter conference. I found myself hanging out with powerhouse litigators like Peter Williamson, AILa leaders such as Charlie Foster, consular experts like Jan Peterson, and then a couple other young bucks, Angelo Paparelli and Brian Bates, whose ambition even then eclipsed their youth. I was surrounded by great lawyers, great people doing great work with incredible camaraderie. It was really an immigration law overload. An overload of professional and personal excitement. It was an incredible thrill to be surrounded and developed by those dedicated lawyers, and they were immigration lawyers. And I still get that very same feeling, that very same thrill today when I'm around you. The nation's greatest minds on immigration law, not just practicing law to make a living, but to make this country and this world a better place for everyone. I have a lot of people that I want to thank for bringing me into this very challenging practice. Vance Winningham, an early member of AILa who gave me my first job as an immigration attorney. Peter Williamson and his father Sam, who who hammered into me that the only way you could be a great immigration lawyer was to practice immigration law with fire in your belly. And then there's Steve Laddick and Gene Butterfield and Kathleen Walker, who taught me the value of giving back to this great organization. There's Sean Orm and Jay Solomon, because those guys were always just there for me in the background and helping me keep focused over the last 6 years. There are so many other of you that I also owe a great deal, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more in the future. But equally important, and other groups, please don't be offended, but I've got to give a great big, huge shout out to the Texas chapter for having the courage to elect an Oklahoman to be their chapter chair many, many years ago. Now, my good friends in Oklahoma tell me that that was just an act of wisdom, but those from Texas tell me it was simply intolerance at the time. No, we don't do our work as immigration lawyers in a professional or in a professional vacuum. And I get and you get charged up every day as we move forward and help these people. We're just so privileged to help wonderful people. There are two very special people who are here today that I brought with me. I want to thank these two for invigorating and renewing in a very special way my love for the practice of immigration law. And you're probably going to see me have a John Boehner moment here in a little bit with a tear or two. But you all know people just like them, the ones who have touched your heart in the very same way. And I want you to meet Angel and Gabriela Tepe, and they're here to say a few words to you, and I think they're very important. Let's welcome the first recipients of DACA from Oklahoma. Angel, Gabby.
Good morning. My name is Gabriela Tepe, and this is my brother Angel. We were both born in Guatemala. In 1994, my mother brought us to the United States for a better life. Our dad was already here, and I was 4 when I entered.
I was 2 years old. Coming to the U.S. at such a young age, neither of us remembers the journey. I just remember growing up all my life in the United States, and this country was my home. I never knew anything about Guatemala. Our parents made a life for us here, and they later had 2 more children, my brother and my sister. To tell you the truth, there was a very long time that we didn't know that we were different, that we were not U.S. citizens.
When we finally got to middle school, Angel and I started to realize what was going on. Our parents sat us down and told us that we were not U.S. citizens and we were in this country illegally. In 2005, Angel and I and our parents were placed in removal proceedings.
Growing up, I remember having to skip school to have to go to unknown places with my mom, my dad, and my sister. I remember a lady who was trying to help us get our papers. The place I remember going to the most was the Department of Homeland Security building. It was a strange feeling as a young boy having to get my fingerprints taken so often growing up. But it was also a scary feeling walking in there knowing you had to be on your best behavior because our parents told us if we didn't, the lady was going to yell at us. Walking into that building and seeing our parents take off their shoes, belts, and walking through a detector is something we grew up accustomed to.
My parents filed for cancellation of removal, but Angel and I didn't qualify. My parents didn't win the case, and all of us were granted voluntary departure. At that time, we didn't even know what that meant or how serious it was.
The person my parents hired to help us wasn't a real attorney. She took our case to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and we lost the appeal. My parents hired a real lawyer who filed a motion to reopen. In 2007, the case made its way to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. Based on some legal issues, the case was remanded to the immigration judge. In February 2009, my parents were granted permanent residency.
But it was bittersweet. We tried to file for cancellation of removal and our parents as qualifying relatives, arguing that they would suffer extreme hardship if we could not become permanent residents too. The immigration judge didn't agree though, and he just gave us voluntary departure. Our attorney appealed the denial, but on May 3rd, 2012, it was dismissed, giving us until July 2nd, 2012 to leave the country.
We were devastated. My whole family was. After years and years and all the effort and resources and hard work that was put into our case, we had to leave the U.S. Our family unit that was once a strong unit and seemed unbreakable was going to be torn apart. It was a thought none of us could wrap our minds around or even imagine what life would be like without our parents or them without us.
We prayed and turned to everyone that was supporting us and that had been supporting us since day one. They started to write letters, and along the way, people heard our story, and more people were willing to help in whatever way they could. We had people that were angry and sad at the same time. We had crazy offers, like people who wanted to adopt us, but only a miracle could save us.
Gabby and I don't know Guatemala. That is not our country. This is. But as time ticked on and the miracle hadn't happened, we started to make preparations to leave.
On June 15, 2012, the government announced deferred action for early childhood arrivals. I believe most of you were at the AILa conference during this announcement. AILa was posting bulletins on the internet. AILa was rapidly educating its attorneys on how to file DACA cases. AILa took the lead in working out strategies to protect young people who were about to be removed. The filing window did not open until August 15, 2012. But because Angel and I were in removal proceedings with a voluntary departure date of July 2nd, 2012, we were given special consideration.
Thanks to God's good grace and all of the hardworking people in AILa, on July 2nd, 2012, we were granted deferred action. This was our voluntary departure date. It was a miracle, and even cooler, we were the first cases granted in Oklahoma.
There are no words to describe how thankful we are with every single person that has helped us throughout this journey in our life. It was a very stressful situation to be in, and it has taken a huge load off of our shoulders. Thanks to AILa attorneys, we are able to begin a new chapter in our lives. I am now going to get to graduate from a U.S. college.
We are so thankful to all AILa attorneys, like all of you who continue to fight for people like us. You have given us hope that better things may happen. So while we are here to personally thank AILa and each of you for your hard work, we also want to ask you to continue to fight for a better immigration reform so that one day we may become residents and citizens and continue to give back to this great country. Again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. God bless you all. Thank you.
Wonderful, buddy. Thank you. And a law that AILa is Laura Lichter because she was out there just blistering the internet, just tweeting, retweeting about what lawyers can do, who you can reach, who you can call out to. So please, a special thanks to Laura Lichter for her hard work on DACA. Thank you, Angel and Gabby, because you are the reason that we love to practice immigration law. You guys are great. All right. Having been to, I've been doing this for 30 years, so having been to at least a couple dozen of these annual conferences in the last 30 years, I've noted that there's always a common theme, or oftentimes a common theme, coming in the speeches from presidents, and that's that their lives have personally been affected in some way by immigration to the United States. Wow, this is cool. I remember Bernie. And Bernie Wolfdorf was talking about how that he too was an immigrant because he had to flee his country to seek asylum in the United States. David Leopold talked about how his father was a Holocaust survivor. And the one that really got me was the story when we saw the pictures of Eleanor's mom and dad and her older sister fleeing the communist bloc. And many of you have similar stories. Many of you yourselves are first, second, and third generation Americans. Your passion for immigration law is clear. But as Elle said, I'm a 14th generation American with no real life personal experience with immigrating to the United States. And so that that passion, it's still here with me for different reasons, because my passion for immigration law, for immigration justice, it came from another place. It came from being an American and believing in the promise of this country. So then really, what is it that brought me here today? You know, looking at my past, my heritage, and from the things I'm going to share with you, I might appear to be the least likely person to have ever become an AILa president. And you may recall, and I know you will, that I had to run for the Board of Governors by petition, and I had to run for ExCom by petition. So obviously there were several nominating committees out there too who likewise thought that I would probably be the least likely qualified candidate for AILa presidency. Well, what events in my life led me down this path? Well, let me tell you what I witnessed. And to do it, I've got to do it very carefully. I've sort of got to thread the eye of a needle, and I've got to do it with absolute respect. I want to talk to you about a journey from indifference to involvement, from ambivalence to passion. In 1962, in a small Oklahoma town with a population of 2,800, there were three little boys playing together in a park that day. It was a hot, hot summer day, and two were white and one was black, and they were attending two separate church functions in the same park. It was a bold, in 1962, experiment of religious gatherings, and we were children. And the three thirsty little boys, ages 5 to 6, raced to the water fountains, and the line at one fountain was very long, and the two white children looked across the park, and they saw their recently found friend, and there was no line at his water fountain. So they ran across the park, and they joined their friend at drinking from the uncrowded water fountain. It was a separate water fountain. It was unequal. It was stained and unkept by city employees, and it was covered in weeds. But the water was ever so refreshing. Suddenly, two men from their church grabbed the two little white boys and sternly advised them that they couldn't drink from that fountain because it was for colored. It wasn't safe to drink from that fountain because it was dirty. The gruff men told the little black boy to go to his family, and the white children were taking to their parents, who were admonished for allowing their children to drink from that colored water fountain. To this day, right now, I still remember the confusion and maybe even the quiet outrage of the men when my mother laughed it off as something that just really didn't matter, because she wasn't outraged, she was just indifferent to the issue. Well, that evening, my parents tried to explain to me why there were some water fountains that I could drink from and some I couldn't. I don't want you to get the wrong impression, because this wasn't one of those explanations which involved a huge explanation of the equality of man or the evil of segregation. They just explained to me what I guess was the sense of the country at that time. They weren't exactly critical of blacks, but they weren't supportive either. They were simply indifferent. And it might have been very, very hard to explain the concept of segregation to a 5-year-old boy, because it's pretty hard to explain that to anyone. But I just remember my parents didn't have any particular interest in the issue. Like I said, they were indifferent. And as a child, I could see and I recall numerous other instances which evidenced I was living in an era where people were treated differently simply because of the color of their skin. That was the norm, and good people were indifferent. And I was a kid. Indifference was happening everywhere, not just in my family, not just in my church, and not just in my community, but in most families, most churches, and communities throughout the South. I was too young to know it at the time, but our country's political leadership was well aware. The civil rights movement would never succeed without the support of the South. And opposition leadership in Congress from the South, they thought it was never going to happen. Why? Because the people the voters in the South were indifferent, and the not indifferent racist opposition controlled the voice of politics in the South in the 1960s. But then in May 1963, something happened. It was called Birmingham. I remember Jack Pennock's talking about this. It was the Children's Crusade. And in my little corner of Oklahoma, things started to change. The indifferent started to wake, started to care. May 1963, there was a march in Birmingham. Now, black workers were told that if they participated in the march, they would lose their jobs. So what happened? The children marched. May 2, 1963, over 1,000 children staged a peaceful march in Birmingham. What happened? Well, the police, those who had been sworn to serve and protect, turned water cannons and German shepherds loose on the children. Violent, graphic images were televised across the nation. Over 900 children were arrested and many were injured. My mother saw those images, as did mothers all across the country. Mothers saw what was happening to children, and my mother and mothers across the country awoke to be indifferent no more. In the 60s, when mothers got mad, fathers listened. And when fathers talked, churches and community organizations got active. And when churches and civic organizations in the South tell their elected representatives what to do or to vote for something, sometimes you can have reform. That was the turning point for my family, my community, and my state. No longer would they be indifferent. Some churches opened the doors to the black community. A Civil Rights Act was actually passed. Racial equality became a national goal. As the years went by, my mother picked up my black friends and brought them to my church. We played together, ate together at my home, and my world changed. But let me make one thing very clear. That change was not a matter of changing the minds or the hearts of the true racist, the intolerant. They were still there, and guess what? They're still here today. The change came when good people lost their indifference to injustice. It came through education, motivation, and information. Trust me, I'm not standing up here today to give you a history lesson, but it's important to remember that history often does repeat itself. And I believe that we, all of us in this room, are about to be part of a very important piece of history. We are facing a similar problem today with immigration reform. Our next challenge is not to win over the intolerant. It probably can't be done. We know it can't be done. Our job is to keep the intolerant from reinforcing indifference. Our job is to educate, inform, and to motivate good people. We've now reached another pivotal point in this country's future. We are engaged in the fight for immigration reform. And just like the movement that started civil rights reform, we have those who are bitterly opposed and will stop at absolutely nothing to see that their antiquated and morally wrong ideals continue. But we also have those like you and many more of you in this room, those who will champion the cause of immigration reform, the cause of justice, the cause of the fundamental value of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Our opposition doesn't always look like Bull Connor or Lester Maddox. Sometimes they come with a veneer or a veneer of education and reason. And we'll never reach those like, and you guys remember this just recently. Remember Harvard graduate Jason Richwine? The guy who compromised the Heritage Foundation study by having earlier published a paper that falsely claimed that Hispanics would never reach IQ parity with whites. And then he turned around and authored a Heritage Foundation report making wild claims about the cost of integrating the undocumented immigrant population. Like others, Jason, he tried to hide behind his real motives. This battle will all come down to relative competing principles, and it will come down to reaching the indifferent. We know that those forces will never make us doubt ourselves and our values. And we know that the Chris Coballs of the world can't win the battle if we make it a battle of ideals and principles and not a call to hate and fear. And we must likewise recognize that we can't win this battle alone either. We can't do it by ourselves. This battle will be won or lost when we win or lose the indifferent. Those who are at this very moment, this place and time, have no particular interest or sympathy in our cause. Their lack of concern is not real. They are not evil people. They are just currently indifferent. It's time to awaken the mothers, the fathers, and the churches. It's time for us to persuade the indifferent to put aside their lack of care. It's time to educate the indifferent with true facts, the benefits of immigration reform. In this day and age of internet, social media, and the rapid exchange of information, education is going to be our best ammunition. And we fight this battle with facts, with knowledge, with principles. Those on the other side, however, will still try to instill fear and prejudice. I recently blogged in March that reforms seems to be within reach and that it's clearly different this time. And I know many of you have shared this with me. You can just almost feel it in the air this time. You know, a newfound courage by congressional leadership from both sides of the aisle, being cheered on by evangelicals in the South, business and trade organization leaders in our financial hubs and industrial cities, moms and dads throughout America's heartland, all rallying together and recognizing that we can no longer be indifferent. We know it's happening. We know it's happening because of recent events in the South where religious groups rallied around Republican Senator Lindsey Graham and provided him the support he needed when he spoke in favor of immigration reform. The indifferent are starting to listen and to change. The indifferent are beginning to learn the truth that the legalization of 11 million people without status will be good for our country. It's happening because educators and the media are beginning to expose organizations like FAIR for what they really are. Education is our ammunition. It's happening because people like AILa member Deborah J. Townsend, who's co-chair of the Florida Advo Central Florida chapter, she's taken the time to blog about how immigration reform will be a boost to our economy, and how in a letter to Congress from the American Action Forum, 111 economists got together, signed the letter, and stated, immigration reform's positive impact on population growth, labor force, housing, and other markets will lead to more rapid economic growth. Again, education is ammunition. It's happening because this Congressional Budget Office just said last Tuesday that legislation to overhaul the nation's immigration laws would cut $900 billion from the federal deficit over the next 2 days. 2 days, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Over the next 2 decades. Why? Because education is ammunition. It's happening because the American Immigration Council released a report documenting U.S. workers will recognize income gains exceeding $30 billion per year because reform will raise the floor of all workers, especially those undocumented who are receiving substandard wages. It's happening because our national staff have given tirelessly of themselves, working feverishly on the Hill, sharing statistics and the benefits of reform. It's happening because reform provisions will make it easier for entrepreneurs, investors, foreign nationals who earn STEM degrees to immigrate to the United States. It's happening because nearly 1/4 of Silicon Valley because 1/4 of the Silicon Valley firms have been formed by foreign nationals. It's happening because the unions, the U.S. Chamber, and civic leaders all across the country are stepping up, educating their respective members, and are now likewise championing our cause. Immigration reform is becoming a reality because the undocumented children have been given a voice. But unlike in the 60s, when you had 1,000 black children express themselves in Birmingham, today we've witnessed hundreds of thousands of dreamers come out of the shadows and prove to the indifferent that they are good kids who merely want a chance to share and participate in the American dream. Kids like Angel and Tepe. The indifferent are learning that this country's inability to fully utilize the world's talent pool, we can't capture the world talent anymore because of our antiquated system, not sufficient H-1Bs, not sufficient employment preference numbers. Once the indifferent are fully educated and informed, they will learn that roughly 2/3 of all engineering students in the U.S. today are foreign students. Yet, U.S. companies can't employ these resources because of ridiculously low H-1B visas and preference numbers. The truth is, we need immigration reform for this country to remain at the forefront in the development of new technology. Our struggling economy needs immigration reform to pull itself back to the top. Every sector, the hotel industry, service industries need workers. The agricultural industry needs workers. And there's a severe shortage of people who want to work in nursing homes and to be caregivers. Reform is happening because you, the very backbone of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, understand the importance of shared responsibility and sacrifices. Now, we know that any reform, whatever it looks like coming out of the House, will have provisions we really like and provisions that will weaken our knees. So if we're willing to compromise, if we're willing to take less, why are the opponents of reform prepared to sacrifice nothing in exchange? Well, history has proven why. In 1963, George Wallace stood on the steps of a schoolhouse door to oppose desegregation, but he disguised his motives by stating he was merely protecting the rights, privileges, and sovereignty of his state from the federal government. George Wallace took a symbolic stand in opposition to a reform movement, and that act would plague him for the rest of his political years. History is repeating itself because right now, U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, a longtime passionate opponent of any meaningful immigration reform, has taken a stand against an equally important immigration reform movement. He argued that the bipartisan Senate bill was crafted by special interest groups and that his concerns were for the economic consequences arising from passage of any such law. He cited no studies. He offered no proof. You know, there are some actions you take in life that you can never live down. Well, Senator Sessions, please don't let your opposition to immigration reform haunt you for the rest of your political life. This is where it gets personal, because Sessions came out and he specifically criticized AILa. He indicated that we helped draft this bill so that we could be the biggest winners. Well, damn straight, Senator Sessions. AILa had a hand in crafting this proposed legislation, but not for the reasons that you state. You know, we're not involved in this simply to pad our pockets. Let me educate you, Senator Sessions. Remember this? AILa is an organization of lawyers. We were established to promote justice, advocate for fair and reasonable immigration law and policy, advance the quality of immigration and national law and practice, and enhance the professional development of our members. AILa is proud of its history of giving back to this country. So Senator Sessions, you know, we all wear, Sessions, we all wear your criticism as a badge of honor right now. In 2008, AILa President Chuck Cook challenged us to live up to our mission statement. Chuck made it clear that AILa would no longer tolerate injustice against immigrants because injustice to immigrants is injustice to ourselves. Would you know, since that challenge, AILa and its amicus team has participated in more litigation than AILa had in all previous years combined? Did you know that the AILa Consumer Protection UPL Committee continues to every year give thousands of hours and great work to increase community awareness about the dangers of UPL and delivering incompetent or fraudulent legal services? And AILA's just launched a free webinar for community groups and individuals. It's entitled, How to Promote Good Legal Advice for Immigrants and Protect Your Community Against Fraud. We've already had 500 participants in this webinar, and soon it's going to be available for free through the Immigrant Advocates Network. AILa established the Military Assistance Program in conjunction with the JAG Legal Assistance Office to provide pro bono services to active duty members of the U.S. Armed Services, especially those who are deployed, leaving family members behind in tenuous or uncertain immigration status. Over 6,000 members have benefited from this meaningful program to date, and the number continues to grow. So thank you, MAPS lawyers. Each April, AILa chapters organize and sponsor AILa Citizenship Day. It's a day of free naturalization clinics for those taking the final step to become U.S. citizens. This year, 22 AILa chapters hosted 40 pro bono clinics throughout sites across the country, helping more than 2,500 individuals take that final step towards their dream of American citizenship. And what about the AILa pro bono program? The past year alone, AILa members have registered and recorded over 15,000 hours of pro bono time. Guys, that's a lot. Thank you so much for your efforts there. This week, during this conference, dozens of AILa volunteers will give back to our annual conference host city by participating in a pro bono clinic taking place Saturday at the Hastings School of Law. Last year, when we visited Nashville, we helped over 200 people, or 200 of our members helped serve the Nashville area. This year, we hope to give back more to San Francisco. But AILa continues to meet the challenges of protecting the undocumented. We're going to be there. We're always there. But let me tell you who has been left out in this battle for immigration reform. In this bill, it's small business, the core of this country's economic machine. Many continue to be indifferent to the value of foreign talent to small business. This compromise negotiated in this bill has left small business vulnerable. One such example, and it's probably not even on your radar screen yet, and that's what's happening to the H-1B program. You know, while numbers have slightly increased, the new legislation is going to raise the prevailing wage for entry-level employees to about 18 to 20% higher than similarly situated U.S. workers. Small business can't operate within those guidelines. Small business can't work with that. Small business is going to be killed by this program. Small business, Senate 744 essentially kills H-1Bs for small businesses. So let me tell you this, do this. Those of you who represent small business need to educate your clients and have them send a message to the House that the process to hire certain foreign workers needs to be workable for employers of all sizes. Send that message because education is our ammunition. I want you to get to know the names and recognize the faces beside you, because if you agree to stand with me, if you stand with AILa, our staff, and our elected leadership, I promise that we're going to continue to fight to protect the rights of immigrants and to challenge those who would cripple business by limiting their ability to hire the world's best talents. Now, I hope you're with me on this, because if you ride and you help us in this fight, if you join us in this endeavor, if you can help us deliver Boehner, then each of you are going to be the heroes of tomorrow. And I can't think of a more exciting time. I can't think of a more exciting time. I can't envision a more important time to be a leader of this organization. Thank you so very, very much for putting me here today.